Hey, Inspired Moneymaker. We're going to learn how Jiu-Jitsu changed one man's money mindset, curbed his self-doubt, and sparked a fight for financial freedom. Episode 234 features Paul Halme, Masters Jiu-Jitsu World Champion and entrepreneur.
You can really take and make every child or grandchild a millionaire. You put $200 away on their birthday from birth to age 18, and then never invest another dollar again. At 65, they'll be a millionaire. I mean, that's insane to me. I mean, because you're giving them an extra 20 years of compound returns. I talk to people all the time, like, well, I don't make 200 grand. I can't be a millionaire. I'm like, well, you put $400 a month away into the S&P 500, let it compound, you're going to be a millionaire. It's just math. It's time.
I'm Andy Wong, host of the Inspired Money podcast and financial advisor at Runnymede Capital Management. This episode is brought to you by Seeking Alpha. Seeking Alpha Premium is a subscription service that gets you everything you need to make smarter investing decisions. Whether you have a portfolio of stocks, ETFs, or mutual funds, Seeking Alpha Premium gives you expert market analysis, proprietary quant ratings, unlimited call transcripts and earnings calls, powerful stock screeners, and more. It's quick and easy to link your brokerage account. With Seeking Alpha quant ratings, author ratings, and Wall Street ratings, you'll immediately get a snapshot that tells you which stocks in your portfolio rank well or those that might require attention. Join over 200,000 subscribers today. I have a special for you too. Use the link inspiredmoney.fm/alpha for a 14-day trial. You'll get 50% off by buying the annual plan. It's $179.99, which works out to less than $15 a month. Now, let's get on to the show. Today's guest is not only a champion on the jiu-jitsu mat, he's a champion in business. Paul built his business into one of the most successful gyms in the US. He launched a consulting company that helps gym owners to systematically grow and succeed. This is a story about living a freedom lifestyle of Paul's own design. In this episode, you'll learn investing lessons from a former stockbroker, what jiu-jitsu can teach you about money mindset, and stay tuned to the end to learn how to build multiple sources of passive income. Now let's get inspired with Paul Halme. Paul, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Andy. I'm excited to be here.
Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
Man, mine is probably like a lot of people that grew up in my generation is negative self-talk from my parents. Like we couldn't afford things or, it was always my first recollections of money were negative. So it's one of the things I've been really on a mission to help change is to get rid of those things because that's my first memories. And it's kind of sad. I talk to a lot of people and they grew up the same way.
What did you learn from your parents about money?
Man, from my parents, unfortunately, I learned that there wasn't a lot of money in the world and a negative mindset. My dad was a super negative person. My mom was cool, but we didn't have much money growing up. My dad had a good job. He was actually a nurse back in the day when it was a really good job. It still is a good job, but he was just horrible with money. So I never learned a lot from them. But luckily, I had a couple uncles that were pretty successful, and I would try to learn from them and see what they were doing and how they were doing things. And they were the first ones that kind of gave me a start of like, oh, okay, there actually is money out there in this world.
Well, I look forward to talking about money mindset and how that can impact one's life. First, tell us how a college golfer got into martial arts.
It's a funny story. So yeah, I was definitely a different person. So I was getting to high school and everything, and I wanted to go to college. My parents were like, oh, we can't afford that. You're gonna have to do it on your own. I was like, oh, great. So luckily I was playing golf and I got pretty good. I wasn't good enough to get to a big school, but I was good enough to go to a Division II school and get a partial scholarship and then get a job at the golf course there to help pay for my school. So I played 4 years of college golf. I was a walk-on and actually made the traveling team my freshman year. So I played all 4 years. And then my best friend was graduating. He was moving down to Texas because at the time jiu-jitsu was just getting big. The Ultimate Fighting was getting huge. And he's like, I'm going to move either to New York, LA, or Dallas. And he's like, well, I can't afford New York and LA, so I'm going to Dallas. You should come. And I was like, no, I'm just going to stay here in South Dakota, and then I started looking around at people and I'm like, man, all these people that I looked up to, they're all doing the same thing. They haven't evolved. And it's no knock on them. It's just a small town mindset. Like I started seeing people and it was like, work Monday through Friday. The highlight was to go to the bar on Friday and Saturday and then Sunday recover and then do it again. I was like, so like 3 days before he moved, right before I was going to graduate, I dropped the bomb on my parents. I was like, hey, I'm moving to Texas, and talked to my grandfather. He was a super cool guy. And he's like, man, just try it. You give it a year. If it doesn't work, you can always come home. What's the worst thing that can happen? I was like, all right, cool. And that was one of the single best decisions of my life. I mean, everything from that moment on in my life changed dramatically.
That was after college?
Yeah. So I played my 4 years in college in South Dakota, and then my buddies moved to Texas and then came down here, and he ended up becoming a famous UFC fighter. He won the Ultimate Fighter 4. So I got to do a bunch of cool stuff like that. So I evolved into I fell in love with MMA and jiu-jitsu, and that led me into entrepreneurship and opening my own gym. And so it's been a wild ride. But yeah, it's a funny story when you go from college golfer to MMA fighter. It's like, what? People don't believe me. I tell them now they don't believe me I can play golf. And it's like, yeah, I still can. I just don't have time.
I mean, we see that golfers come like in all shapes and sizes, but I don't think that there are too many golfers who like get in the fighting ring.
Yeah, no, it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare. So it was a strange thing. It was a perfect time, perfect storm. I moved down here. I didn't have really plans on doing jiu-jitsu. I just wanted to hang out and get a job and meet people and just move to a big city. We moved just outside of Dallas in a suburb, and it was like culture shock for me. I was like, man, there's like 6 lanes of traffic and all these people. And it was like sensory overload. But so jiu-jitsu became like an escape for me. And then I got more and more addicted to it, fell in love with it. And it just changed my life.
Initially, was that like a fitness thing, or was it just hanging out with friends? And
it was
like,
both. It was
how did you just like got into grappling, right?
Yeah.
It's like you totally got into it big time.
Yeah. I didn't have a big choice because my best friend, we were roommates, and like he was going to school at UNT down here, but he was training twice a day, and if I was at the apartment, he's like, hey, we're going to go train. I was like, all right, cool. And like the first year I honestly didn't like it that much, but he's just kind of a bully and he kept making me go. And then it was like, I started to get better at it. I'm like, oh man, this is kind of fun. And then you start getting in shape and you start like feeling better about yourself and more confident. I'm like, okay, there's something to this. And then, from there I just fell in love with it. And that was 25 years ago.
So was that Travis Lutter?
Yes. Yep. Yes, sir. Yep. Won the Ultimate Fighter 4. So I got to do a bunch of cool stuff with him, travel around the world. And it was cool. MMA took us a lot of cool places: Brazil, Thailand, London, Singapore. I mean, all kinds of crazy places.
Wow. So you really got an insider's perspective early on when the thing was like pretty new.
Yeah. It was so small. I tell people a story. It's like, I knew like one of Travis's fights, Dana White and Chuck Liddell's came in the back. They just walked into the back, and they're talking to everybody because UFC it was making no money. It was in its infancy. Dana was just a regular dude trying to find fighters. He was literally the one doing the recruiting. So he was at the fights watching it. And I think we were in Boston for that one. So it's just cool. It's like, I got to see early on, how and then watching the UFC evolve to what it is now is just insane.
Were you fighting too? Were you competing?
Yeah, I did a small run at fighting. So I was competing in jiu-jitsu a lot, and then I was way too old, but I was like, you know what? I'm running a gym. I want to be a good role model. I always have this theory of like, if I'm going to teach something, I need to do it. So I started training with Travis for his fights, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to do a fight. And I did a couple fights, and that was fun, but I just didn't have that thing. I don't have that killer instinct that the guys that are really good at fighting can be very mean on call. Like, I can't do it. I'm just like my old videos, if you watch them, I'm hitting the person, looking at the ref like, can we stop this? It's like, I don't want to keep going. For me, jiu-jitsu has been more of a thing that I love way more than MMA because it's something you can do for a really long time, and you give this great brotherhood of people all over the world, and it's the best workout ever. I mean, I joke around and say it's like playing chess, but the chess pieces are trying to choke you or armbar you. So it's complicated. It's a mental and physical sport. So it's great.
Is it more defensive than offensive?
Actually, yes. Yeah. Jiu-jitsu is really a defensive art designed, you get taken down or something happens or somebody pushes you down, you trip, whatever. Is how to recover on the ground, how to get back up if you need to, or how to subdue somebody so they can't hurt you when they're on top of you. Because that was the big shift when you first watched the early UFCs. The person on top, everybody's like, oh, he's going to destroy this little guy that's on the bottom. And then the little guy won, and we were all confused. I'm like, how did that happen? I don't understand. It's like, we got to figure this out. And so you start doing that. So yeah, jiu-jitsu is very defensive, but it has a great offensive aspect to it. But that's kind of secondary. Like a lot of times the offensive side is like, doing for tournaments, things like that. But anytime I've been in any kind of an altercation thing, for me, I avoid fighting like the plague. Like if somebody wants to fight, whatever, no, see ya. It's like, I'm in Texas. There's too many guns. I want to get shot. So for me, it's like, but I use a defensive mindset. Anytime I've been in is like try to diffuse a situation, and usually that works out way better than, trying to meet hostility with hostility.
I, in my limited experience, I find that the more that you know about fighting, and if you're practicing a martial art, that's one of the takeaways. It's like you want to avoid that physical confrontation because you don't know what's going to happen and you don't know what weapon the guy has.
Oh,
So it's
exactly.
always better to save it as a last resort.
100%. And loss. I mean, we live in a crazy, world. It's like, somebody attacks you and you do something and you get sued. It's like, what? It's like, I want to avoid that at all costs.
So in this journey of yours with entrepreneurship and UFC and jiu-jitsu, how does being a stockbroker fit into there?
it was another funny story that goes back to jiu-jitsu. So I graduated from college, came down here, and I didn't have a job. I didn't have any friends. All the friends I had were in jiu-jitsu, and I knew this one guy, and he seemed pretty successful. And we talk about it. He's like, "Oh, I'm a stockbroker." I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool. I love the stock market. I love learning about it, stuff like that." He's like, "Oh, you do?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, do you have a degree?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, but it's in criminal justice." So, at one point I wanted to go to law school, and then I was like, "No, I don't want to go to school anymore. I don't want to be a lawyer." And so I have a criminal justice degree. I'm like, "What am I going to do with this? I don't want to be a cop." I was like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And he's like, no, you got a degree. This is in 2000. So like the market was on fire. He goes, "No, we're hiring basically anybody with a degree that has people skills, and you got people skills." I'm like, "All right, cool." So I went in, filled out the application, applied, had my interviews, everything, got hired, literally knew nothing, and then it was the best corporate job I ever had. Like I wouldn't trade those years for anything. I learned so much. And like you talked about money mindset and your financial thermostat, when you start talking to people that have real money and you see it and you look at these accounts and you're like, "Oh my God, what does this person do? How did you," and you can't ask them, but some people will talk about it, but you're just seeing millions and millions of dollars. And I'm like a kid, I grew up in South Dakota, and I thought like 10 grand was a lot of money, and like you get into that world, 10 grand is like, do you want to get them off the phone because they're wasting your time because, the company wants you to move millions of dollars. And you're like, so my thermostat went from like here, it just blew off the chart. Like it changed my whole mindset about money. It was the biggest, coolest eye-opening experience for me. Like I recommend that job for anybody to go through it, if they want to go that route. It's amazing.
Yeah, talk about some of the things that you learned and what some of the important investing lessons you came away with.
It's funny. The investing lessons I learned was like, and it's funny, you go back to read all of Warren Buffett stuff, like anything he or Charlie Munger says, I learned the hard way, the most boring investments are the best investments. Like whenever I get caught up in hype, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be a day trader," and it's like, okay, there goes all that money, lost it all. It's like, and then I tell people stories of mistakes I've made. Like I was like, "Oh, I'm such a smart trader." When the iPhone 1 came out, I told my wife, like, "Hey, I'm going to put some money into this. This is going to be a big thing. Apple, I'm going to do this." It went up like 20%. And I was like, "Man, I'm so smart. I'm going to sell it, take my profits, do something else." And literally, if I just would have left that $10,000 investment, from iPhone, there was actually an article about it. I always talk about it. I need to Google it. But there's an article talking about if you would have bought 10 or $1,000 worth of whatever it was of the iPhone stock the day the iPhone 1 came out and never sold it, it's like 700 and something $1,000. And I made like $2,000 because I tried to time the market. So I learned like timing the market doesn't work. Everybody I've met that's, "Oh, I'm a trader." It's super hard. It's super stressful. Dollar cost averaging, consistently investing. And it's like, Warren Buffett talks about beating the S&P 500 is one of the hardest things in the world to do. Most fund managers can't do it consistently. So how are we as individuals going to do it? And we've had a nice run the last couple of years where it was like, you could put your money in anything. And it's like, you're a genius. And now it's gotten real quiet now because the market's just ripping everybody to shreds, which it was due for a correction. I mean, we've been having a great run since 2009, so that's a long, long run. And so this reset, who knows when the bottom is. Hopefully it's getting close because I'm not enjoying it. But I learned it's like, you know what, as long as you have time, you keep investing, you keep buying. And those were like the biggest things I learned was just, asset allocation was one thing we always harped on a lot about when I was a broker, but just investing consistently and for the long term and not trying to time the market.
So are you an S&P 500 index kind of guy? Do you mix that with trying to own companies of like products and services that you know and are familiar with?
Yep, that's kind of my thing is like, I got away from doing the trading. So I started buying things I know and like, like I joke around. It's like, I got an iPhone sitting here. I'm on a Mac. It's like, okay, I should probably get some Apple stock. Between my wife and I, we have Amazon packages coming every day. So I was buying Amazon stock. So for my main retirement account, I like to just use indexes and forget about it. But then I have other accounts. Well, that's more of my like fun, like, "Oh, hey, we made this, 100% return. You got lucky in Amazon for a year." And then it's like been flat the last couple of years. So I do like to dabble in companies that I use because I think those can be crazy good returns. Like, I got lucky. I do a lot of different stuff at my school. When I was teaching kids classes back when I was starting my school, I would have the kids play a stock market game, and the parents were like, this is so cool. So because it's one of the life lessons I learned in middle school. So a teacher taught us that and was like, that's what got me really hooked on the market. So I did it with the kids, and my son did it. And I gave all the kids like 10,000 fake dollars and showed them how to look up stocks and pick stocks and everything. And my son bought Amazon. It's a funny story because he came home that day and he's like, oh, you won the week contest. He's like, Dad, you need to buy Amazon. I'm like, Chase, man, it's at $300. I'm going to wait for it to come back. It's 300. It's crazy. And he still makes fun of me about it. So it's like, I give my son a good education because luckily I was smart enough when it hit 7. I'm like, for the love of God, I got to buy some of this, so I bought it at 7 and ridden it up to like 3,000. So, it's a 4x return, which is crazy. But I've also bought things where it's like, get caught up in the hype. Like last year I got caught up in a little bit of the ARK hype. I'm like, oh my God, Kathy Wood's the smartest person on earth. So I put some money in there and, that's down approximately 60%. So it's like when I have days like that, I'm like, why did I just put it in the S&P 500 and just leave it alone? So like, as I get older, I'm 46 now. So like my retirement funds, like I'm trying not to touch those. I'm just trying to leave those in indexes, just don't mess with it. But then like other money, yeah, I still like to invest in companies that I love because there's so much upside in some of these things. If you're really using them, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think valuable lessons in there. One is that get rich quick. Like the sexy story usually doesn't end well, and boring is really good. And I like the consistency. You just keep dollar cost averaging. You just keep buying the S&P 500 consistently over time, and that tends to end very well. What did you not like about being a stockbroker?
Man, the 9 to 5, the grind, is like clock in, clock out, have your set breaks, set lunches, and then it was a thing that my buddy Travis actually told me because I was like, oh, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and at that time I'd slowed down on my training because I was focused on moving up the corporate ladder and everything like that. And he's like, dude, you're just a number there. I'm like, no, I'm not. They need me. I'm not. I'm not a number because he's been an entrepreneur his whole life. Like he's never had a job and he doesn't understand jobs. I'm like, no, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then one day I was sitting there thinking about it. I'm like, wait, I really am, because like some people had left and we just replaced them, and I'm like, oh my God, they can replace me in 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, this sucks. This is kind of depressing. And I was watching him build his business, and I was like, I want to maybe do something like that. So I started helping him out and then helping him grow his gym. And then he was like, man, you should open a gym. My wife was like, oh, you should try opening a gym. So I did both for 2 years. So that was a rough 2-year patch. It was like, work my 9 to 5 and then come home, say hi to the family, and then go teach jujitsu for 3 hours every night. So it was a interesting 2 years, but
wow. So you were burning the candle from both ends during that period.
Man, it was crazy. Like it was insane. It was not.
Did you have kids then, or was that before kids?
I had 2 kids. It was insane. My daughter just been born. So, but I was like, oh, it's just going to be a hobby, and then I got more and more addicted to it. And then it's like, the gym got bigger and then my life got busier. And I was, I told my wife, we have to make a decision. I said, this is, I can't do both anymore. I'm going to snap, and she was like, well, just, if you want to she's super supportive. She's like, well, if you want to take the risk, take the risk. And I'm like, well, the good news is my license won't expire for 2 years. And I have a good track record. It's like, I can walk away, do it the right way, do my 2 weeks, everything like that, get a good recommendation. And I got 2 years to go get a job if I need to. And then luckily the gym worked out, and then we grew from there. And so it's been amazing.
Yeah, talk a little bit about, because it sounds like you didn't grow up with a lot of money. You had this scarcity mindset growing up. So after graduating from college, you got a good job, you're making good money. You were there for a pretty good stretch. So I would imagine that on paper, it's like success.
It was perfect.
Like Paul is successful. He's a young guy. He's got a good job. Is it is this a story of like leaving that good 6-figure job to follow your passion and take that leap?
Yeah, it's kind of evolved into that. Like I would tell people, it's like, I wouldn't trade that for the world going through that experience. Like it was a great company. It was a great job. It was crazy cool to learn everything. But then at the end of the day, I was like, man, I can't be here. It's going to sound crazy, but it's like, I can't be here 8 hours a day chained to this desk. I'll be an entrepreneur and I'll work 12 hours a day, but I control my time. So it's like, I work more than I ever did, but it's like, I have more control. So it's like, I'm able to, like, I wouldn't trade that like with my kids. Cause like I hated dropping my son off at daycare when my first son, cause it was like, my wife was working the day shift, and when I got hired, they had an evening shift where you didn't have to go into like it was 1:30. It was a really weird shift, like 2 to 10, I think. So like I could stay with my son in the mornings and do stuff and run errands or like that. And then I have to drop him off at the babysitter for like 3 hours till she got off work and she pick him up. And then I drive to work and then do that. And so it's like after I left, it's like I got to do so many cool things with my kids. I got to be around them as I was growing the business. Memories will pop up on Facebook of like my son like helping me like build stuff at the gym when he was like 6, 7 years old. It was a really cool experience. And then it fueled another passion of mine was travel. It was like, because when I started doing stuff with Travis, we were traveling all over the world. And then I started doing stuff with my gym and doing stuff. And it's like I can't get that many vacation days and get approval. So yeah, it's definitely a different story where it's like entrepreneurship. Once it got a hold of me, I was like, oh my God, I love this. I want to do more of this. And then it became like just awesome.
So tell us, how has jiu-jitsu changed or shaped your money mindset?
Man, jiu-jitsu helped a lot because it's funny. And one thing about jiu-jitsu that's crazy, if you ever get around it, you walk into a room, you'll see the most diverse group of people. You'll have a bartender, a tattoo artist, a surgeon, a lawyer, a cop, a federal agent. I mean, it's insane in my gym. I just laugh because I'm like, it's like the melting pot of the world and everybody's super cool. Nobody cares about, if you're right wing or left wing, it's like, they just want to train and have fun and do all that. And through jiu-jitsu, I met some people that were like very wealthy and I got to hang around them and I was listening how they talk to their kids. And this is one thing I talk about whenever I give a keynote or anything is like, I started listening to them talk to their kids and I'm like, what's going on? Like, what? I don't understand. Like they're talking about money and like life and all these things. I never once hear them say, oh, we can't afford that. Or, money to them, it's like, it's not, I can't afford it. It's like, how do I afford it? Like they just spoke so different. I'm like, man, these kids, it's not fair. It's like, I grew up being told that I can't, we can't do this. We can't do that. These kids are like, their parents are like, no, you got to do this, this, and this. Cause if you get this done, then you can get into a better school. And I'm like, man, I had to go to school on my own. I had to do my own applications. I had to pay for my own school. So like, that was one thing I got from jiu-jitsu was, seeing that and getting interactive. That's one thing with my kids. Like I always fought that thing of being like, oh, we can't afford it or, oh, we can't do this or money's evil and stuff like that. So that helped a lot. But the really big thing that jiu-jitsu helped with is just pressure. Life is hard. I mean, life is crazy hard. The last 2 years was insane. Now it's are getting to the point now where they can't afford gas. They have to make life decisions based at the gas pump. And jiu-jitsu's taught me pressure. It's like, because when you're getting smashed by another person and you're like, oh, okay, I can just tap and reset, or I can figure a way out of this. So problem solving has been huge because solving problems under pressure. So life stuff happens and it's like, oh, okay, this sucks, but how do we improve? So that's a huge thing about jiu-jitsu. It really makes you stronger mentally.
And that translates it helps shape your money mindset, but it sounds very directly related to your business mindset too.
100%. Yeah. It's like I joke around, like if I'd have been an entrepreneur in a different industry the last 2 years, in a state that was, super liberal and shutting everything down, I would have lost my mind. Like I'm in Texas, we're pretty much conservative and wide open, but when they shut us down, I was like, oh my God, it's like, they literally just took my business away. Like, and my friend Travis, like he was way over and he's like, oh, it's over. Everything's done. I'm like, whoa, calm down. So we had some good talks and everything. And it was just like, but mentally I was like, okay, I can do this. We can figure this out. And luckily I had been, investing and planning for so many years. Like my wife's like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, well, I said, we're fine. I mean, I don't want to go into my investments. That's like the last thing I want to do. But if we have to, and everything does melt, we're good. We'll be fine. But then I also do consulting for other gym owners, and it was just devastating to talk to them. I'm like, well, how much money do you have put away? And they're like, oh, like $80. And I'm like, you're in a bad spot. Because a lot of guys and entrepreneurs we get caught up in putting all of our money back into our business. Like, oh, I'm just going to put it all back in the business. And I'm like, that's one thing I talk to my clients about. I was like, no, don't put it all back in the business. Because no matter how good you are, how good your gym is, it's like, they literally shut people down and threaten to arrest them. It's like, you need outside you need money and other things. So that's been a passion of mine, is educating people. Like, you've got to take money out of your business and put it into other things.
Interesting. So this consulting business, is that Combat Business Success?
Yes.
And that's with UFC fighter Alan Belcher and Amy Majors?
Yep. Yes, sir.
How did that partnership come together? Like, you're running the gym, right? How do you end up creating this consulting business?
Man, for me, I was running the gym and I got known as like because I had the business background from being a stockbroker. And my big claim to fame, like my first book I wrote was like how to make money with your martial arts gym if you never won anything. Because back when I was running my gym, most of the gyms were run by guys that like they'd already done something cool or anything like that. And I did nothing cool. I'm like, I'm just a regular dude that's good at business that likes jujitsu. And then I was having more success than these super famous people. And they were like, well, what, so I got this reputation as being the business guy, and everybody wants to pick your brain. And that was like the worst, couple of years. Oh, let me pick your brain, or I'll buy you lunch, or I'll buy you coffee. I'm like, man, just leave me alone. Because what's going to happen is we're going to go. I'm going to get lucky if you buy me lunch. I'm going to tell you all these things to do, and you're going to do nothing. And then you're going to tell me it doesn't work. And then you wasted 2 hours of my day, So when Alan and I would go to different marketing events, well, I knew Alan from the UFC, and he's younger than me. He's like 10 years younger. I knew him from the UFC, and he was on the way up as Travis was kind of on the way down. And then we would go to this marketing event in California. It was a fitness business one where it was like a lot of fitness gym owners and bodybuilders. And me and Alan just stuck out like sore thumbs because with my ears, you really can't tell, but my ears are like super jacked up under my headphones. So, and Alan's look the same. So when we go places, we're both big guys. So it's like, people just look at us like, oh my God, what are these guys going to do? They're like, so it's like, so we just stuck out, we'd hang out. And then he was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this consulting thing. A lot of guys are hitting me up. I'm like, oh dude, I've had so many guys hit me up, and it's just, I don't want to, it's like, he said, well, no, let's do it the right way. Set this up. So he set it up. We started helping gyms, and then we started to get some success, but then we both realized pretty fast that we needed someone to organize stuff for us. And that's where Amy came in. She's like super good at organizing things, systemizing stuff, laying down the groundwork. Cause Alan is like just rocket fuel, and I'm more like trying to balance stuff out and move things around. But Amy's the one that puts the systems together so everything runs smoothly and the customers have a better experience, and then we grow. So yeah, it's been a crazy partnership. So we've been doing that for, I want to say, going on 5 years now.
It sounds like a good division of responsibilities and a good team.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. Yeah. It's a great team. So, because you have to have that one, like in the book Rocket Fuel, you have to have the integrator and I forget the other one, but visionary. So Alan's a visionary. He's literally, I spend all my time trying to rein him in, like, dude, no, calm down. And then I'm the integrator who's like, you got to pick up the pace. We got to get this thing launched. And I'm like, dude, and then Amy comes, she's like, well, we can't do this because we don't have the systems to do it. And then Alan's like, oh, okay, fine. Let's get the systems. Let's get this, and then we run with it. So yeah, it's been wild.
I'm curious for you in terms of what you enjoy and even like revenues and profitability. What's better, running your gym or doing the consulting with other gym owners?
Pre-COVID, doing the consulting. Because when you're consulting for businesses that are closed, it's a very tough business. So it was depressing too. Like I love pre-COVID. I loved consulting with gym owners. It wasn't about like their problems as much as like, hey, let's implement these systems. And then they'd be like, oh my God, I made this money. This is so great. You're the best, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, cool. And then when everything happened 2 years ago, then they were like, man, I can't afford anything. My gym shut down. And a lot of them lost their gyms. They're starting to come back slowly, but profitability of the consulting, definitely, because the gym, you can run it at a certain point and then you run out of profitability and then you open more locations, what everybody thinks is the right answer. And that's usually the wrong answer because you don't have good enough systems to be able to facilitate multiple gyms. At one time I had 4 gyms, and that was like my unhappiest, most stressed out part of my entrepreneurship, because I was everywhere. I was at 4 different gyms, running around like a chicken with my head cut off and not making any money. And I was like, okay, so then I got down to 2, then I got down to 1, and now I just run 1, and it's like, it's so awesome. But so the consulting, helps. And then my big thing, and like you're talking about passion, is my big thing is like, now that I'm a little bit older and I'm seeing how things work in the world, is like buying, other assets that create income passively. So you're not like tied to it. So it's like, now I'm getting to do other things because I spent so much time investing in the stock market and putting money away. Now it's like, I get to buy into other businesses, with basically silent ownership. So I have no responsibility. I can't say anything. So like, it's the coolest thing ever.
That's just an investment, and you're hoping to get like almost an annuity out of it, right? You're collecting a cash flow.
Yep, exactly.
So you're helping entrepreneurs to fix their finances. What's the fastest way to do that?
Automation. So for me, it's all about automation, right? Because everybody's like, nobody wants to budget. I don't want to budget. I hate budgets. Everybody was like, oh God, I don't, and everybody's like, well, if the Dave Ramsey method is like, well, do this, and this, and wait till you invest. Most people are never going to get to the point of ever being able to invest if they do that. I've talked to people all the time, like, oh, I finally got all my credit cards paid off and everything. I'm like, okay, cool. How much money do you have put away? And they're like, nothing. Like, okay, got a problem here. So one thing I do is I tell people, and when you go through it, is look at what you've got set up, especially if you're a business owner. So I do two different models. If you're a business owner, I tell them, if you got your checking account, tomorrow you're going to go open a savings account and you're going to move money. If your account allows it, you're going to move money every day, every business day, if not like once a week or 3 times a week. And they're like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm like, start with $1. Just start. Because once you start the automation, it just goes. And then it's like, then you talk to them again, like, okay, you're doing $1 a day. Can you do 2? And they're like, oh yeah, it's easy. Okay. And then later, can you do 4? Can you do 8? And then you get to 10, and all of a sudden now it's like $210 a month. Over the course of a year, it's a couple grand, which to a person that has no money in an emergency account, even $2,000 is, I forget what the stat is, like 70% of Americans couldn't handle like a $600 bill or something like that. And it's terrifying. So like these guys, I'm like, yeah, you need to budget. Yes, you need to pay off your credit cards. I said, but you've got to start investing, because time's the most important thing. You look at any chart, as you're going through, you put the money in. Like, investing is boring the first 10 years unless you got a whole bunch of money, because it just does this. And then everybody knows when you're like 50, 60, all of a sudden it's just like, whoa, here we go. And then like, so the guys who wait till they're 40, 50 years old to start investing, it's like, you're not going to get that rise unless you live to be 90 years old. It takes forever for the compound returns to kick in. But that's another thing I learned, when I was working as a broker is compound interest. And, Einstein's the 8th wonder of the world. It's the most powerful thing there is.
Yeah, that's what makes people, like, that's what makes an everyday person able to be a millionaire. Is 100%. That the secret? Because I know that you're an advocate of that anybody can be a millionaire.
Anybody can. It's like just time. I mean, there's a crazy stat. And I forget, I need to write down the person's name to quote it. You can literally make every grandchild, I say grandchild now because I'm too old to have kids. I don't want to have any more kids. I'm 46. I'm good. But you can literally take and make every child or grandchild a millionaire. You put $200 away on their birthday from birth to age 18, and then never invest another dollar again. At 65, they'll be a millionaire. I mean, that's insane to me. I mean, because you're giving them an extra 20 years of compound returns. So you look at the other way, people are like, I talk to people all the time, like, well, I don't make 200 grand. I can't be a millionaire. I'm like, well, what's your car note? And they're like, oh, it's 450 or whatever, $400, and it's probably more now, but the old number is like 400. You put $400 a month away into the S&P 500, let it compound, you're going to be a millionaire. It's just math. It's time. But the problem is the time piece. The time piece is where we all get hosed, especially if you're in the middle class or lower middle class with, a messed up money mindset, is like, you might not start investing till you're 40. And then you missed out on 20 years. Like I get annoyed because I didn't have money to really invest until I was working, I was 26. So I was like, man, I'm 6 years behind where I should be right now. So it's like, you look at charts and like, it's just, the growth is insane towards the end.
Do people need to be a business owner, or that's irrelevant?
Irrelevant. Man, if you have a good like I joke around, like if I'd have stayed, I would probably have more money in the market if I would have stayed at my job, because we had a crazy 401k match and profit sharing. It was ridiculous. I mean, I'm like, you give us all this free money every year. It was like, it's insane. Like if I would have stayed there, yeah, I'd have more money probably now in my investment accounts, but I wouldn't have, done the things I did. But yeah, I mean, if you have a job and you don't have to be an entrepreneur, like get the match, get the profit sharing, and just leave it alone.
And let it grow. Boring. Let it grow. In a boring way.
In a boring way. Yeah. Don't try to time everything because it's too hard.
So talk a little bit more about the philosophy of creating different sources of passive income. What does that look like?
Man, that's been like that's my biggest passion right now. It's like, because, I did my corporate job, then I've been an entrepreneur, then we have opened another company consulting, did investments, and then getting into things that create, like, everybody's like, oh, passive income isn't real. And it's like, well, it is. I mean, if you've heard of a dividend, that's passive income. You didn't do anything. It just, they gave you, whatever it is. Apple just did one, was it last month? I forget what it was, but it's like, here's free money from Apple. So, oh, cool. That's one version. But then I got involved with a group through jiu-jitsu again, of course. This one guy was super successful, and he's like, hey, I'm doing this corporate real estate deal. I'm buying this building, blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking for guys to put money in. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll put money in there. And then nothing happened for a long time because I didn't realize corporate, like commercial property, it's not corporate, commercial property takes a long time to turn around. So it's like, but now checks are starting to come in, and I'm like, whoa, this is amazing. It's like, what do I do? I get the check from the mailbox and then I put it in the bank. It's like, it's the best job ever. So then I started doing that. And then I got involved investing in other businesses, like silent investing. So basically, like, I'll give you an example. We have a syndicate that's opening up 10 coffee and donut shops this year across the country. And it's like, I own like 2.5% of some, but it's like, the coolest part is I have literally, they, even at the investor meeting, they're like, don't tell us your ideas. Don't bother us. If you're one of those people, we're going to give you your money. We'll give you your money back. And I'm like, oh, I like this. This is cool. And like, yep, you'll get your quarterly distribution you'll get, the P&L, and then the quarterly distribution that shows your profit based on the 10 locations, da, 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 da. And that's it. And I'm like, this is cool. So I can't say anything and I don't have to worry about anything. And then you give me money. I'm like, I like these guys, and so it's like doing stuff like that's been cool. And then we got in on a new thing I just did is we just, another syndicate got into is we did an Airbnb that's going to be built. It's pretty cool on the ocean in Florida, where I'm like, it's just, to me, I'm like, oh, I wish I had more time and more money to do more deals now. Cause it's like, I'm seeing things like 10 years ago, Paul didn't even realize this stuff existed. Even 2 years ago, Paul didn't, I saw people doing it, but I'm like, oh, what is this? So I basically, I'll give you a hack to everybody that's listening, is if somebody's where you want to be, get around them. It's simple. It's like, if people are like, well, I don't want to pay to go to this event, I don't want to pay to go to that. I'm like, then they're not going to talk to you. But it's like, I go to events, I pay my fees to go to events, talk to people, hang out, don't ask for anything, just be cool. And then they love that, and then it's like, then that's how this one group I got into is literally, I was in one group hanging out, and I got to know a bunch of the guys. And then one of the guys like, hey, we're thinking about doing this and we're looking for people that want to do it. I'm like, dude, I'm in. Just let me know. Yeah, it sounds amazing. I have no idea what you're doing, but I want to do it because I've seen your success, and boom. So just get around the people who are where you want to be. So it's like, if you don't understand the market, watch CNBC every day. Turn off the news and just watch CNBC. You'll learn more about that. I joke around, like, my wife's super knowledgeable because she watches CNBC all the time. It's all the time in our house, like, during the day. And, it's so funny because she didn't go to college. She doesn't, never worked a corporate, like, high-end job. She basically was a stay-at-home mom and then helps with the business. But it's like, she'll send me the most random text, like, oh man, Netflix reports earnings tonight. I'm like, I create a monster, it's like literally, and she's the best example. That woman never sells. Like, I sell all the time, like, and I've gotten better now. She's like, like, she just buys stuff and holds it, it's all stuff that she likes. Cause I was trying to teach her about investing. I'm like, just, honey, she'd be like, oh, Kramer said I should buy this. I'm like, well, what is it? She's like, I don't know. What do they do? I don't know. And you're going to put money into that. And she's like, oh, you're right. I go, what do you know? And she's like, well, I like Netflix, and Chase always plays Call of Duty, and then, stuff like that on Amazon. So she she was buying Netflix at like $50, $60. And I'm like, okay, you're smarter than me. But yeah, you can educate yourself. There's so much knowledge out there.
Yeah, I'm a financial advisor, and I have to say that what I've witnessed among clients and people that I've met is there are people who just amassed a lot of wealth. They never sold anything.
Yeah.
Like, my accountant's father was an accountant, and he was also a professor at one of the colleges here in New Jersey. That guy just loved insurance stocks, and he would just buy insurance stocks probably from the time that he was like 20 years old in his first accounting job, and just for his entire career would just invest in insurance companies and other financials. I think he liked banks too. And by the time that, like, this is a guy that retired, like, probably 70 years old, lived until he was in his 90s. And, some of them went bankrupt. He lived through the financial crisis of 2008. He was retired at that time and saw his account get hit, but it just grew so much from the time that he was 20. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's insane. A lot of the biggest mistakes I've made is, buying stocks in companies I don't understand, and then selling the good ones because they made money. It's like, oh, why did I sell that? Why? It's like, oh, if I just would have kept the stock I bought on Apple when the iPhone 1 came out, it'd be a joke. I mean, it'd be so much money. It wasn't even a big investment. It's like, it's just crazy. But I don't know. It's probably a limiting mindset, things like that, where we don't want to lose, so we sell our winners. It makes no sense.
Well, we worry about valuation a lot.
Yep.
And when something has gone up a lot, like if you own Amazon and it's $1,000, you see four digits and it
Yeah.
feels like you're like, oh my gosh, it's $1,000. What should I do? I better take some profit.
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's funny because Amazon's one of my favorite ones. I talked to a guy one time, and it was like, I forget when it was, but Amazon was bounced around like 1,500, and he's like, dude, there's no way it's gone up too much. It can't go above 1,500. And then like a year later, he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, I didn't listen to you. Don't worry about it. It's like,
So these
it's crazy.
syndicates, you find these syndicates just through your personal networks?
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. It's funny what I just started, getting it out there that, I like this stuff. And then I would talk to people about it. And then I've met and just go to different events and masterminds and talk to people. And then I'm like, I'll see somebody and I'm like, what does he do? And they're like, oh, he does this, this, and this. And I'm like, okay, he's smart. All right, put him on my list, and then follow him on Facebook and Instagram, comment on their stuff. And then if they have something coming up, like, oh, hey, we're going to have this whatever mastermind thing for a day or two. Then I'm like, oh, cool. I want to buy a ticket, and then get known by these guys. And then opportunity happens because you're in the right spot.
As an investor, how do you kind of measure or think about the risk, like investing in Apple versus investing in the coffee shops?
Man, I've got a really good one. So like for me is always like my main thing. Like people are like, oh, stock market, literally people are insane. Oh, stock market's dead. Oh, crypto to the moon. And I'm like, no, you're insane. It's like, yeah, maybe crypto will work. But my most dedicated thing, because I've seen the results, I know it works. It's like I used to work in that industry where I've seen people that amassed millions of dollars off of modest investments because they just did it consistently. And I'm like, okay, this works. This thing works. We don't know if crypto's going to work. I don't know if the donut shops are going to work, things like that. So, and I'd gotten this advice from my friends who's super wealthy, and I was going to do something like speculative. I was like, oh, I want to get into this. I want to say it was like oil futures. And he's like, oh my God. He's like, he goes, volatile that is. I'm like, no, not really. And he's like, okay. He goes, I'm going to give you some really good advice I got from somebody. He goes, you always have your core investments. You're doing that. He goes, yeah, dabble in different things, but he goes, never dabble with more money than you're willing to take out in the backyard and set on fire. And I was like, okay. So like crypto, it's like when the market goes up and down, I'm kind of like, okay, because I didn't put enough in there where it's going to hurt me or tell my wife like, oh, hey, honey, I took out a second mortgage on the house and I bought, Dogecoin and now we're poor. So I dabble with that. And then, that was the first thing is I'll dabble in other things. But then getting into these other investments was like a lot of research too. Cause it's like, I keep watching the guys and like, okay, these guys know what they're doing. They're successful. It's like the old saying, like, don't bet on the horse, bet on the jockey. So I see these guys and I'm like, man, they killed it in this industry. And now they're doing this and they've got this system and they've got this going. Okay, cool. And then like one thing, cause I've been married for it'll be 23 years this year. So like my wife and I have really good communication about money, and she's actually a little bit more aggressive than me, even though she never sells. But I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about doing this, this, and this. What do you think? And by talking it through with her, because I like to be fully transparent with her. I don't want to hide things from her because that's a huge reason for people getting divorced is like money and stress and everything. So we talk about it and I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And sometimes she'll be like, that's a horrible idea. And then sometimes she's like, oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, people eat donuts. Even during the pandemic, people ate donuts and coffee. So I'm like, all right, cool. I said, these guys are really legit. I follow the things they do. They've opened this, this, and this. And so, yeah, it's a lot of research, but at the same time, I would never take money from my core investment. So I've always tried to like, my retirement, things like that. That's put away. That's invested long-term asset allocation, stock market, boom. And that way I always have that. So if something goes wrong, I can always go back to that because that's going to be a good chunk of change when I retire. But then it's like, money comes in from my business, it's like, okay, I've already maxed out my retirement accounts. Do I need to buy more stock or should I take that money and should I buy into, XYZ thing offer that's out there? So I do a little bit more of that. As I've got a little bit older, I want to shift more into trying to create more passive income. So it's when, that way I have more options, but I'd never deviate from the original plan of like stock market, maxed out IRAs, HSAs. Like I still have that hardwired. So I do that. And then I dabble in the other stuff. And then as the markets do better and as business turns around, hopefully the war in Ukraine ends and all that stuff and the world gets back to normal, we'll start seeing people will start making money again and doing things. And it's like, okay, then you have more money. It's like, do you go buy a fancy car or do you put that into another business? So, for me, it's like, I just really want to build passive income assets while I'm running my original plan.
So do you have any interest on buying the fancy car or never?
Well, yes and no. So like like I drive like like a Lexus person, so I love my car. It's awesome. It's great. Some people think it's, oh, that's too expensive. And I'm like, it's not really that expensive because my friends have Porsches and Lamborghinis and stuff. So I feel poor when I'm around them. But other people are like, oh, you must be nice to drive a Lexus. And I'm like, it's not that great. It's just a fancy Toyota. It's like, but I like it. It's great. Great company, great service, stuff like that. But yeah, I have friends and I look at it and I'm like, man, I could get that Porsche and I just move this around, this around, this around. But I'm like, I like traveling more than a Porsche. So to me, it's like, I follow one guy on Instagram. I forget his last name. This guy, he's really been a successful trader and everything like that, where he basically was like, he only buys like high end stuff from passive income. So I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. So right now I don't, because maybe someday, but I'd rather travel.
Yeah, experiences.
All experiences. Yeah, it's like, I've spent a lot of money on traveling and I don't regret a dollar. I don't think I've ever spent on traveling. And then you buy a car and you're like, cool, it's a car.
Well, I like the shift from being more growth oriented with your like S&P 500 stock index investing. And then as you get older, I think there is a natural transition towards more income oriented. So you want the dividends, you want to collect rent, you want the passive income coming in from some of your private investments, because then you're generating cash.
Yeah.
And someday when you're not working anymore, that's like, instead of getting a paycheck, you have cash coming in that you can use for travel and maybe buying your fancy car.
Yeah. Yeah. You never know. Oh yeah. But yeah, travel is always one of the things, but yeah, creating that, cause it's like, and you being a financial advisor, like people, you get older, it's like the conversations change. It's not about like building wealth, it's preserving wealth. How long am I going to live? What's my income plan going to be? Things like that. For me, it's like, I plan on working forever, doing what I do in some way or shape, but it's like, I still want to be able to be like, hey, you know what, if something goes wrong or we need to go somewhere, or maybe my son moves to Arizona and has kids there. And it's like, okay, well, we need to go there I want to go there for 6 months out of the year. How do I do that? Okay, cool. I got this money here. Boom, just gone. So yeah, it's cool because we're living in a crazy, crazy time. Cause like, I remember when I first started as a broker, it was hard to buy stocks. It was freaking expensive. It was like, if you called in, people call in, I'm like, do you want me to put this order in? It's like $59. Like I couldn't comprehend it. I'm like, people pay $59 to buy stocks. I'm like, you can do it online for like $19.99. Now we live in the day and age where it's like everything's free. Like you can, and fractional shares didn't exist back then. So people are like, people are like, oh, I couldn't buy it on Amazon. Well, you can now because you can buy fractional shares. So, I mean, there's so many opportunities. People are like, oh, I don't have money to make money. It's like, well, just start now. Put like $5 a day into something. It's like you spend that on, Starbucks is probably more than $5 a day, but still have fun. But I mean, it's like, you have so many opportunities between, the stock market, crypto things, all this new stuff that's coming out, different investment opportunities. It's just such a cool time to be alive. And it's just going to keep getting better.
Yeah. And hopefully just doing like $5 investing, that's the beginning. Like you get a taste of it, you understand it, and then you want to learn more and you want to get more involved.
Oh yeah.
Paul, I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
Man, I define success, and I couldn't steal it from, I forget who it was, but is so I gotta stumble here. So a lot of times when we're first coming up and we're trying to think, everything's about getting money, making money, doing that. But to me, success is about the quality of life. So if you follow a guy, it's funny because actually he was like a little bit younger generation than mine, but I caught a glimpse of him. Rob Dyrdek, you remember hear of him, the skateboarder?
Yeah,
so
sure.
He became like this super wealthy guy, and he was trying to do some things, and they were like, dude, your financials are a mess. You're like, all this stuff. So he basically I heard him on a different podcast, and he was talking about how like he designs everything around his life. Like it's around his family. It's around this. Like he makes a gazillion dollars, but he never sacrifices any quality. He's like, everything's about quality of life. So to me, it's like, if I can do the things that I want to do, if I can see my kids growing up, hopefully grandkids someday, stuff like that. I can travel. I can, eat what I want to eat. I go to a restaurant, things like that. To me, that's success. Some people are like, no, you got to have a Lamborghini. You didn't make it, and it's like, why? It's like, okay, it's like some people. So for me, yeah, just the better quality of life. And that's where investing becomes so important is the sooner you invest and the more often you invest, you can create a better quality of life for you and the next generation. And then you can teach your kids and your grandkids about the stock market, about investing, and you can create generational wealth instead of being like my parents where it was like, oh, there's no money, rich people suck, money's evil, all the things we were programmed with. And just taking that out and really like, and I think you brought it up earlier, is that the mindset too is just huge, because, unfortunately, like the leading cause of death of guys my age is suicide, and to me, that's like, I can't get my head. People are like, they get to their 40s and they're like, man, it's over. And I'm like, what? No, it's just starting. Like, to me, like 46, like, yeah, when I was younger, somebody said 46, I'm like, oh my God, they're almost dead. But now I'm like, 46 is like the new 30. It's like, yeah, I'm going to take care of my body. I'm going to work out. I'm going to eat healthier, get through these things, and then have all these opportunities and create things. Cause yeah, things, somebody's listening to this podcast right now and things might not be going their way. And they're like, oh, my life is tough. And it's like, man, as long as you don't quit, it could always get better. I mean, just keep going, just keep going. And look at the thing you can maybe, if you're out of shape and you're like, oh, I can't go to a gym, then start walking. If you're broke, start investing. It's like, if you got some bad habits, get rid of them. You'll find money. It's like, I love the ones people are like, man, I sure wish I could invest. And you see them buy a pack of cigarettes and you're like, wait a second, that's like $8. Because a lot of it comes down to choices and quality of life. So yeah, I mean, to me, it's like, just keep going, just keep going and enjoy it.
I love it. Quality of life and the turnarounds are possible. And let us not forget that there are people out there who own multiple Lamborghinis and they're miserable. They're not happy at all.
I had a guy I knew from the jiu-jitsu world, of course. He did everything right. He did everything right. Worked hard, did everything. And then he sold his business, bought like this ridiculous Mercedes, started living this party lifestyle, and just became the most miserable human, like was so unhappy. And then he took his own life.
Oh, it's tragic.
I was like, it was an eye opener. Cause I was like, I looked up this guy. I'm like, this guy's got everything. He did everything the right way. He's living this life and he was, divorced and out partying in his 40s, got hooked on drugs. And then just was like, one day just didn't want to live anymore. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's not all about cars and money. It's like, it's about life. Cause yeah, you see people that are, there's super rich, happy people and super rich, mad people.
Well, thanks, Paul. Thanks for sharing all your stories and your personal Inspired Money story. Tell the Inspired Money viewers and listeners where they can follow you and learn more.
Man, the best place right now is Instagram. I like Instagram a lot. Facebook is just, yeah, I know they're owned by the same people and everything, but Instagram is just such a happier place. And I put a lot of free content out on there. So if you just go to Instagram /PAUL_HALME, that's my name. Easy to find. But I put a lot of free stuff out there. You can learn a whole bunch of cool stuff and see some of my traveling and stuff as I kind of ramp that back up.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Paul.
Thank you, Andy.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? I loved hearing how the Jiu-Jitsu Gym attracts people of all walks of life. And kudos to Paul for noticing how wealthy people talk differently about money. By listening, he changed his own mindset. So today, he invests in stocks, private businesses, and is always on the lookout for ways to build passive income. If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment, post a comment here or in the Inspired Money Makers Facebook group at inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. Thank you for watching to the end. I want to invite you to subscribe to my email list that goes out every 2 weeks. The Runnymede Investment Team highlights data, news, and events that we think are worth sharing. Subscribe at inspiredmoney.fm/newsletter. It's free and informative. Thank you for joining me on this mission. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.